had here. Let's begin by saying that, let's describe the reality that the United States faces today. First and foremost, this is a country that doesn't need to be convinced of the benefits of legal immigration, because virtually every single one of us, including those watching here now, people that work in this building and across this country, are all but a generation or two removed from someone that came here from somewhere else. And so we don't need to be convinced of the virtues of immigration because we have lived them. We see them every single day. And in fact, we read about them as well in terms of great innovations that have changed the American economy and made this country different from any in the history of the world. There may be some debate, but not much, about the value, the importance of legal immigration to the United States. The problem that we face is that we have a legal immigration system right now that is broken. It really hasn't worked well in a very long time. And efforts to reform it over the last 20 to 30 years have failed. Let me describe what's wrong with our immigration process. Number one, it's bureaucratic and complicated. It's just very difficult to navigate the legal immigration process. The result is long backlogs and a bureaucracy that has to be dealt with. You have to lawyer up just to legally come here. That comes with its own set of problems. The second problem with the legal immigration system, it quite frankly isn't based on the 21st century. It's actually based on the middle part of the last century, and a very different economic time in the world and certainly in our country. And that's why you're not going to get a lot of debate from people when you say that we need to have a legal immigration system that reflects the modern era, that reflects our global economy, that reflects our knowledge-based economy. We need a legal immigration system that is good for America's economy. And that means a lot of different things. For agriculture, it means the ability to find workers when they need them. And that's usually most of the time. Foreign workers that come here as guests and work on a temporary basis or even on a year-round basis, but a way to access those workers in a legal way. It also means to continue the flow of legal immigrants to the United States through a safe but reliable and non-bureaucratic process that's cost-effective and encourages people to come here legally. It also means, by the way, that in some industries and in some sectors, from time to time, you will need guest workers, people that are not going to stay here permanently, but people that fill in the gaps, particularly in times of very low unemployment, when you cannot find a domestic worker to do that work. You need a legal way to be able to do all of these things. But perhaps the most important initiative that you need is a legal immigration system that's based on merit and on skill. Now, right now, the legal immigration system is based on whether you know someone that lives here. And if you know someone who lives here as a family member, they can bring you with them. It's this term you hear a lot about, chain migration. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. The problem is that if today our economy has changed, and our immigration system has to change with it. And so I think there is a growing consensus around the country that we need a legal immigration system that is no longer solely based on whether you know a family member that lives here, but rather having one that is built on whether you are going to bring a special skill or talent or fill a certain void that exists in our economy today. The second problem with our legal immigration system is that our laws are not being enforced. And I can tell you that in the last 9 or 10 days since we first introduced a bipartisan bill that we're working on as a starting point for this debate, if there's one thing that's become abundantly clear, is the complete lack of trust that people have on the federal government and on its ability or willingness to enforce our laws. And I want you to know that of all the impediments that stand in the way of immigration reform, none looms larger than that lack of trust in the federal government. I would say that lack of trust in the federal government is pervasive across every policy issue. But it is especially pronounced on the issue of illegal immigration. Too many people simply do not believe that the federal government is enforcing the law or is willing to enforce the law. And as a result, it is going to make efforts for immigration reform very difficult unless we are able not just to convince people, but to show people that the measures that we are pursuing in immigration reform are efforts that once and for all will begin to deal with this problem effectively. And the third problem that we have is this reality that we have millions of human beings living in this country illegally. Some came legally and overstayed the visa. In essence, they came, they're supposed to be here for 90 days, and they stayed. Others crossed the border illegally. The point is, by the way, of the people that overstayed, that's about 40%. In my home state of Florida, it's much larger. The point is, we have millions of people living in this country right now that are illegally here. By the way, people that do not have a right to be here legally. No one has a right to violate the immigration laws of the United States. On the other hand, the decisions that created that problem were made in 1985 and in 1986, when I remind people that I was in 9th grade. And as a policymaker, what I now confront is this reality, that we have 10, 11, 9 million human beings living in the United States in violation of our immigration laws. And to add to that, most of these people have been here for more than a decade. They have children that are U.S. citizens. They may even own property. They work. They're here. And they're never going to go back. So we have to deal with that fundamental reality as well. With all of that in mind is how I decided to get involved in this immigration reform debate. Now, let me explain. There is really very little political benefit to this issue. Believe me. Number one, I would rather be on the floor debating issues like taxes and the debt and the impediment that they place on our economy and on its growth. And I hope we can get to those issues. But this is also an important issue, and it was an issue that was going to come up. I remind the members of my party that we are not the majority here. I wish we were, and we'll continue to work to make that happen. But we are not the majority. And this issue was going to come up on the floor of the Senate, with or without us. And it is a legitimate problem the country faces. And so therefore, I decided it is better for us to be engaged and try to come up with something that works. And that's why I endeavored to get involved in this issue. And that's why I continue to be involved in this issue. As a result of that, I laid out some pretty clear principles about what I think immigration reform should look like. It should modernize our system. It should create real systems for enforcement so we never have this problem again. And it deals with the people who are here illegally in a way that's compassionate and humane, true to our principles and our heritage as a compassionate people, but also in a way that ensures that it's not being unfair to the people that did it right and doesn't encourage people to do this wrong in the future. Those were my principles. And based on those principles, I entered into negotiations with 7 other senators to work on a bill that begins as a starting point of this debate. Now, I've heard criticism about that process. People say, well, it's a secret process, it's behind the doors. Let me clue everybody in on something. Every bill around here is drafted at the beginning in someone's office. And most people here, when they draft up a bill or an amendment to bring to the floor, they don't do it in some auditorium. They're working on it in their office with their staff. That's just the starting point. That bill has to be filed. You're not voting on a sheet of paper. You're voting on a bill that people read and analyze. And that's what this bill is. It's a starting point. It is 8 senators, 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans that spent 2 to 3 months working on a bill that we present to our colleagues and say, this is what we were able to come up with. Now it's your turn to make it better. And we actually have a process here to do that. And here's how that process works. And I don't mean to be patronizing, but it's important to remind people of that process. Here's how that process works. You file a bill. Committees hold hearings on those bills. Then they do what they call markup, which basically what it means for those watching at home is a bunch of senators sit around and they literally vote on changing the bill. People offer ideas about how to make it better and how to change it. That is an important process. That has to happen. And it has to happen with this bill. 2 weeks from today, they will begin that process. Now, I have heard my colleagues come to the floor, some, and express concerns about different provisions in the bill. And I don't have time to rebut every point. Quite frankly, they've raised some very valid points too. But let me suffice it to say that some of the concerns they have are really not valid, and I think we can address that with them. Others are, and some are just disagreements, and they need to be worked out through the legislative process. Here's my encouragement to my colleagues who don't agree with the bill that we've crafted. Change it. Let's work on changing it. If you believe that what we have today is broken, if you believe that the status quo on immigration is chaos and a disaster, if that's what you believe as I do, then let's solve it. And the way you solve it is by working together. And in essence, don't just be against it. Offer ideas to change it. For example, if you don't think that the border security provisions of the bill we have drafted are strong enough or enforceable enough, change them. Offer some ideas. Right now, I stand on the floor of the Senate and I ask any of my colleagues who have a bill to guarantee border security, please bring it to my office. Please offer it as an amendment. I continue to extend that offer. I am looking for an idea to improve what we've drafted. Quite frankly, I think we can get it to be even better. And I think those of us who worked on it would agree. If people disagree with the way we modernize the legal immigration system, let's say they think we don't bring enough high-tech workers or enough farm workers, change it. File an amendment to change it. Here's what I would say, all of it, unless you actually believe that we don't need to do anything, and listen, if you believe that, that's valid, fine. If you believe that what we have is okay, if you believe that we don't need to do anything about immigration, just leave it the way it is, then that's fine. I respect that view. I disagree with it, but I respect it. But if you think that what we have is a disaster, and I think that's most of us, then let's work on it together to change it. In essence, don't view the bill that we've drafted as something that's being shoved down your throat, because it's not. View it as a starting point product upon which we can build something that I hope most of us can support. If you are opposed to this bill or elements of it, try to change it. Try to improve it. That's why we have something called the amendment process. And by the way, that's just in the Judiciary Committee. Beyond that, it's got to come to the floor of the Senate, where I expect there to be open debate, where I expect there to be an open amendment process. And if it passes here, then it has to go to the House, and we have to work with them to get a product we all agree on. Here's my point. If you're going to be against anything, no matter what we file, no matter what, you just don't want to do immigration reform, then that's fine. But if you believe, as I do, that our legal immigration system is broken and needs to be modernized, then let's work to change it. If you believe that we need to be realistic about the fact that we have 11 million human beings in this country who are going to be here for the rest of their life, whether we deal with them or not, and that it's not good for America to have that many people here who we don't know and have no idea who they are, where they are, many of them are not paying taxes, then let's work together to find a way to deal with it. If you believe that our laws are not being enforced and we need to pass laws that force the administration, this one and a future one, to enforce our laws, let's change it. Let's work on something that comes up with that. I'm all ears. I'm all open-minded about that, and so are my colleagues. But let's not leave it the way it is, because the way it is chaos. It's bad for our country. What we have today is not good for the United States. And our job as policymakers is not just to come here and criticize. Our job is to come here and to make a difference. Our job is not just to come here to the floor and make speeches or go back home and give speeches or do television interviews. Our job is not just to poke holes. Our job is to plug holes, too. Our job here is not just to criticize, but to make better. And what we have now just doesn't work. It's not good for our country. We can't leave it this way. And we have a chance now to, I think, truly improve it. This is not an effort to force anything down anyone's throat. This bill that we've worked on is a starting point. It's not a take it or leave it proposition. It never has been. And to pretend that it is isn't fair. To pretend that somehow something's being crafted here that's being forced down someone's throat with no options to amend it or make it better, that's not true. You know that. I've talked to almost all of my colleagues here and extended an open hand, and let's work together to make this better. I really think we have to. Is this the most important issue America faces? No. We owe $17 trillion, and we have no idea how we're going to pay it back. We have an economy that's not growing, and we need to do something about it. But this is an important issue, and by the way, it's related to that issue. And there actually is a growing consensus that we have a chance to do something about it once and for all. Let's work together. Let's work together. To come up with a solution that modernizes our legal immigration system so that it's good for our economy, that once and for all forces the administration, this one and future ones, to enforce our immigration laws, and that once and for all deals with the 11 million people that are here illegally in a way that's fair and compassionate, but also fair to the people that did it right, and also a way that ensures that this never, ever happens again. And I hope when we come back here in a few days, we will begin to work on that together for the good of our country and the future of our great nation.